Did you know every year it is estimated that 15 billion trees are cut down for various reasons? That's more than 41 million trees per day. Welcome to our podcast on environmental issues. I am Brody Howe, and today we're going to be diving into some critical topics that are affecting our planet. First off, I'll kick things off by explaining what environmental degradation is, focusing specifically on how deforestation and air pollution have drastically altered our way of life. Next, Patrick Torres will discuss climate change and environmental protection. He'll provide valuable insights into the latest data on how countries are faring in their fight against climate change and what measures they're taking to combat it. Lastly, Nick McHugh will tackle the topic of carbon emissions. He explores our reliance on fossil fuels, the impact they have on our environment, and the global push towards electric vehicles. Not only as a solution to reduce emissions, but he'll also touch on how these changes are transforming societies because of how it's affecting the power. Please stay tuned for an informative and an engaging discussion. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brody Howe, and first off, I'd like to start by explaining what environmental degradation is and some forms of environmental degradation that are affecting our planet. Environmental degradation refers to the deterioration of the natural environment due to human activities and natural processes. This includes the depletion of natural resources, pollution, and loss of biodiversity. And this is happening in many different ways. A few of the main ways that I would like to go over with everyone is deforestation, or mass deforestation for that purpose. Air pollution, and how all of that is affecting our climate. Deforestation happens all the time. It happens everywhere. A company buys X amount of land, or a crazy land area, and they want to develop it into a bunch of houses or whatever they decide to use it for. So what do they got to do? Clear all the trees. That's one example of deforestation. Deforestation, it does a lot to affect our environment. The clearing of forests for agriculture, urban development, and lodging reduces biodiversity and disrupts ecosystems. If you are getting rid of a bunch of forests in a certain area, that may cause patterns in wildlife to change, which could eventually push that wildlife in a different area and kill them all off. And if they do it too much, it could eventually lead to the depletion of a whole species. So deforestation is a huge issue, and it really needs to be combated a little more. With deforestation, getting rid of those trees, it forces us to not us. It creates an issue where the forests can't play their crucial role in absorbing carbon dioxide and producing oxygen. So the less trees we have, the more carbon dioxide's in the air, and that's just more air pollution that we have. And with the ever so rising usage of fossil fuels, it's just not good for our environment. So we really need to take more measures to go over all that, or else our climate's going to just keep changing for the worse. I truly believe that something needs to be done sooner rather than later. I think that governments across the world need to be creating more strict laws to reduce deforestation, as well as reducing air pollution, even though that's going to be a little bit more difficult to do. But I truly do believe that reducing deforestation can help our ecosystem and environment in the long run. And if we don't start doing something now, it's just going to be bad forever. So we really need to reduce, reuse, and recycle. That's one way we can protect our environment. We need to minimize our waste. That'll create less burning of fossil fuels. We need to be thinking of ways for conserving energy, whether that be reducing the energy you're using, or maybe even look into an electric vehicle. You can shift to renewable resources at home, like solar panels or wind or maybe some hydroelectric power to alleviate some of those fossil fuels that are burning. But I do truly believe that we need to be doing something sooner rather than later. We need to start advocating more policy, stronger environmental protection, and just hope for the best. I mean, our future is going to be reliant on what we do now, and if we're not doing anything now, it's not looking too good. So overall, we need to just do a better job. I appreciate everyone listening to my part. Next up, we have Patrick Torres is going to go over climate change and environmental protection. I know he's got a lot of valuable information, and I'll let him get to it. Thank you.
How's everybody doing? I am Patrick Torres, and today I will be talking about climate change and environmental protection. To start our discussion, our global strides towards sustainability, we must recognize the critical role of international cooperation in addressing climate change. So, central to our understanding and efforts is the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is a universal commitment aimed at capping global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius, with the further goal of not exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius. Each participating country contributes through nationally determined contributions, which are essential to our collective environmental aspirations. An invaluable resource in our toolkit for tracking these efforts is the Climate Action Tracker, which is available at climateactiontracker.org. This independent scientific project provides an up-to-date analysis of how well countries are doing in their fight against climate change. This compares our action to what is scientifically necessary to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement. It offers a clear and quantifiable measure of progress, or also a lack of progress, and it serves as a beacon for policy direction and implementation. The global transition towards renewable energy is also a pillar of our collective environmental efforts. Countries are increasingly investing in sustainable energy sources such as solar, wind, and hydroelectric power, moving away from the traditional fossil fuels. Um, for example, initiatives across China, the United States, and the European Union are not just reshaping their own energy landscapes, but also setting a global standard for renewable integration. Um, Furthermore, our forests and the strategic management of land use are paramount. So through initiatives like Red Plus, we're making strides in protecting forests, which are vital carbon sinks. These efforts are supported by international cooperation and funding, helping countries like Brazil and Indonesia to enhance their capabilities in managing these precious resources. In our shared journey towards a sustainable future, platforms like the Climate Action Tracker provide the necessary data and insight to guide our decisions and strategies. It is by using these tools, we can ensure our actions are aligned with global benchmarks and are effectively contributing to the worldwide effort to reduce climate change. Um, that is my piece, and I appreciate you guys for taking the time to listen. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nick McHugh, and I'm going to be doing a little talk on carbon emissions for our podcast on environmental protection measures. Um, it's not a surprise to anybody to say that society is very reliant on fossil fuels. Um, and I'm mainly going to be talking about coal and gasoline because I think those are probably the two biggest aspects of it. I've got two different topics to talk about in regards to both of those. So the first one is society's push towards EVs. It's in the recent years, especially after EVs started to take off, or electric vehicles. Um, a lot of governments around the world have been making a push to replace not only the population's vehicles, but government vehicles as with electric vehicles. Normally, they have a certain percentage figure, so a certain percentage of vehicles by a certain time frame, but it changes depending on country. Um, but with this two big problems have been highlighted across a number of different sources and such. Um, the main problem that people talk about is most energy grids cannot support that many electric vehicles. You look at the available power output by power plants and such feeding into the energy grid, and then the needed power draw whenever you calculate how many cars would be trying to charge off of that network, and it's there's not enough power production right now. And most of that power production comes from coal. And we're going to talk about that a bit in a second. Um, but the other big problem with trying to replace vehicles with EVs is just a lack of resources and electric vehicles with their big batteries and a lot of electronics and stuff, even more so than new gasoline powered cars. Um, they have a lot of precious materials, precious metals, and rare materials and stuff in them that aren't super easy to find. It's part of the reason why electric vehicles are a bit more expensive than other vehicles of about the same, I guess, niceness. So I think the big issue with the push to try to get everybody to drive electric vehicles by a certain time frame. A big number I've seen is by 2050. A lot of state governments or countries and stuff are trying to say that we're trying to get like 80% of our cars to electric vehicles by 2050 or something like that. I think one of the biggest issues with that is the power grid because we're going to end up causing a shortage in power, and unless we do something in that aspect, then we're just making the issue worse. So, I think the instead of trying to push towards EVs, we should be trying to push towards hybrid vehicles. They're not as carbon neutral as an electric vehicle might be, but they are a lot greener, a lot better for the environment, and it's a lot more feasible to be able to implement hybrid vehicles at a mass scale without having to really improve our infrastructure for it. Going into the next topic, I'm going to start with coal. Coal power and coal in general is by far the most dangerous and most common form of energy production in the world. Um, and a big issue with our try to push to get green energy is renewable energy isn't very efficient. Um, a lot of the times your sources of renewable energy rely on some sort of natural aspect that might not be present at a certain time or might be not be present in an area at all. And they per I guess per square foot, they can't produce anywhere near as much power as some of the other non-renewable counterparts. Um, so going back to what I said, coal is one of the most, or is the most dangerous form of energy production. I'm going to pull up a little chart that I found from this website, Our World in Data, um, where they talk about death rates per energy production. So this chart right here shows um, like the death rate per terawatt hour of electricity. So for brown coal, it would be 32.72 per terawatt hour. So we're going to look at this, and I'm going to talk about something that they mentioned later in the article. So they basically put this into perspective so that it's easy for the reader to understand what this means. And so they go to say that a terawatt hour of electricity is about enough to power a town of 150,000 people for a year. So, looking into that, they go to explain the death rates for each kind of energy production based off of that town of $150,000 per 150,000 people per year. So, in that town with coal production or coal energy, 25 people would die a year. 18 people from oil production, 3 people from natural gas, and then surprisingly, I think to a lot of people, one person would die every 33 years from nuclear energy. So that goes from 25 people a year to one person every 33 years with nuclear energy. And I think that is an important thing to look for our future when it comes to energy. Renewable energy sources like solar, um, hydropower, wind, they're not efficient enough to be able to replace coal and natural gas. So we need to be looking at nuclear energy because nuclear energy, as you see here, is a clean, zero emission, zero carbon emission, safe energy source. And I think one of the reasons why people don't think nuclear energy is safe is because of some of the disasters that have occurred around the world. But you have to think about um, when it comes to these disasters, a couple hundred, couple thousand people have died in these disasters, and that's awful. But you think about how many people have died because of coal power or because of oil power, and it might not be, you know, 2,000 people at one time, but it's in like the thousands, tens of thousands per year across the board from everywhere. Or, it's a much larger number. It's just spread out over time. So you don't, it's not quite an impact, right? And so nuclear power has taken a bad image because of these different disasters, like the Fukushima disaster that happened in Japan, or the big one that I think everybody knows, Chernobyl in Ukraine. Um, but on top of that, there's been a lot of advancements in nuclear energy to make it safer, to make it more reliable. And so it's just trying to push through that public perception of it's dangerous, um, and to get it implemented because um, a big factor is the coal and oil industries because the coal and oil industries know that nuclear has the capability to take them out of business. And so they do everything that they can to make the public afraid of nuclear energy. Um, Going back to what I said before, when I said that EVs would create a strain on the power grid, if we want to implement electric vehicles across the board, or at least increase the amount of electric vehicles to try to reduce our carbon footprint from gasoline powered vehicles, we're going to need to be able to bolster our energy production. And I think that has to come from nuclear. Because if we try to do another renewable energy source like solar or wind or hydropower, we're not going to be able to keep up. And if we just create more coal power plants or more natural gas power plants or whatever, we're not solving any issues. We're just creating more pollution to try to get rid of pollution. I think nuclear energy is the future, at least until we have a breakthrough when it comes to other renewable energy sources. Um, yeah, it's just the EVs. They're not able to be adopted across the population without thinking about our energy infrastructure. And nuclear power is going to be that way because nuclear power is safe. It shows here like a lot less people over a long period of time die from nuclear power. It has zero emissions. It's literally just nuclear material is heated up and it heats up water. That heated up water spins a turbine and that's what creates the power. So I think nuclear energy is the future to uh, our energy production and to getting us to a much more carbon neutral, I guess, state, right? To help clean up pollution and help clean up the environment. Thank you all for listening to our podcast on environmental protection measures and climate change.